Hello and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast from Radio 2 Drive Time here. This week's concise collection of terrible tales includes, here we go, a flabbergasted flugler, which is good, a car calamity, which is okay, an Eiffel of escargot, and a prize posting palaver, which is not bad at all. But who will you forgive? Here come the stories. Drive Time Confession. We welcome back Sister Caroline into our collective. Mother Superior and Sister Rebecca. I have to say this confession had a strange P.S. On it. Right at the end it said, P.S. I have this strange crush on Simon Mayo. And I thought, well, on the one hand, that's very nice. But now, why is it strange? What's strange about it?
Did you write the email?
No. Well, why am I going to say that? Would be strange.
Do you want the answer?
Yes.
He is attractive in a sort of bookish, geeky way, I think. But
I wish I hadn't mentioned it now.
No, that's just me.
Anyway, we'll move on. Sorry, I should have mentioned it. Anyway, nice PS says, thanks very much. Dear Father Simon and the Honourable Three, my confession harks back to the late 1990s when I had just recently started going out with my boyfriend. Every year without fail, my boyfriend's Uncle Jack threw a party and involved various select friends and family. Uncle Jack wanted to have a lively shindig and only invited people that he knew would be fun and interesting. We felt honoured to be classed in that category, of course, and seemed to get an invite nearly every year. One particular year, I started chatting to one of Uncle Jack's very good friends called Bob. We started talking about wine. Bob thought himself a bit of a connoisseur and began reeling off all these weird and wonderful facts about wine. Yawn, adds Saz. He managed to gather an audience with all his bellowing, and he started it being more annoying and even more boring and more pig-headed with all his stupid views about wine. I don't think Saz liked him very much. Bob asked me what my favourite wine was, to which I replied, I'm very much an ABC girl. Now, this is nothing to do with Jackson 5s, nothing to do with the Archbishop of Canterbury. This, as you probably know, means anything but Chardonnay. And with that, at the top of his obnoxious voice, Bob said, how can you not like Chardonnay? Do you even know what you're talking about? Dear, oh dear, I think you really need a lesson in what good wine really is. Now, at this point, as I'm sure you can imagine, I was completely embarrassed. Bob had a loud voice and was pretty sure the whole room was staring at me at that moment. I felt I was stupid and foolish and already knew that I really, really disliked Bob and his chauvinistic and obnoxious views. I'm a polite person, Simon, however, and so not wanting to cause a scene, I let the subject lie, and when Bob had moved on to talk about one of his rare bottles of claret, I quietly left the party. So the story moves on to the following year, and yet again it was another of Uncle Jack's parties. I noticed a crowd of people gathering in the living room. They were forming a circle around someone, because something was going on. Never want to miss out on the action. I wanted to join in and see what was happening, and I stood next to my boyfriend, and there he was. It was Bob all over again. He was in the middle of the room, attempting to play a tune out of some sort of antique French flugelhorn that Uncle Jack normally had displayed on his wall. My annoyance and irritation from the previous year's embarrassment all came flooding back to me at once, and it was at this point that something terrible happened in my head. Bob was sat with his back to us, and all I could see was his big chubby head, beaming at me as he attempted to play a noise from his flugelhorn. My boyfriend had a full bottle of Pinot Noir in his hand, and for some reason I had the urge to grab the wine from the aforementioned hand. This wine, I should say, was a good vintage from California. Its innate tension underscored the flavours and aromas, woodruff, cedar shavings, sweet strawberry and tart plum, apparently. I stood behind Bob whilst he was concentrating on being the centre of attention with his flugelhorn, and I tipped what was meant to be a little drop of wine into his trumpeting flugelhorn. I appeared, though, to be slightly more heavy-handed than I had anticipated, and actually quite a lot of classic Pinot Noir ended up cascading down the open bowl, the bell that the sound comes out of. The wine then coursed through the brass tubes and pistons of the horn, squirting out of the valves where Bob's fingers were trying to eke out a tune. Most of the bottle had gone by this point. For a while the tune continued in an under-the-sea kind of way before Bob realised that something was up. He looked aghast at his leaking instrument, which had now got red wine pouring out of the mouthpiece too. He blew again into his horn, but only a weedy farty noise came out. Like lightning I shoved the the bottle back into my boyfriend's hands as Bob turned round. Now, the crowd of friends and family were roaring with laughter at this point. Bob was facing us, bright red and furious, wiping Pinot off his head, shirt and wherever else it had gone. He took one look at my boyfriend and the offending bottle and put two and two together, assuming it was he who caused the hilarity. Bob pinned him up against the wall, throwing all sorts of insults at him, until he realised, due to the silence that fell, that he was making an absolute fool of himself. He backed off and very shortly after that made his excuses and decided he had a headache and a sense of humour failure and left the party. So, Father Simon, my crimes were many. I wasted a very expensive bottle of wine. I damaged what I later discovered to be a Schalke 1920 B-flat flugelhorn, which had to be taken apart to be cleaned properly. And I covered Bob in Pinot Noir, even though I believe he deserved it. So I don't need forgiveness from him, and I don't really need to ask forgiveness from my lovely boyfriend, as he's now forgiven me because I'm his wife. But I do want to ask forgiveness from Uncle Jack for causing a scene at his much-loved yearly party, and also because every year he must have a huge dilemma as to whether to invite us or Bob to this yearly shindig. Yours pleadingly, Saz, P.S. I have this strange crush on.
Just had to mention it.
Thanks very much for nothing. Anyway, so Saz, bottle of Pinot Noir, open flugelhorn, one into the other. I can just imagine it cascading round like water down a loo. What do you think?
Well, Bob and his flugelhorn do sound really annoying.
We haven't had a flugelhorn confession.
No, we haven't. It
think
was
we need-
about time.
We need more.
What a waste of Pinot Noir as well. I mean, what was it? Nearly the whole bottle going into his flugelhorn.
And classic. So how much is that going to be? 20 quid or something?
I do like the poetry of it, though. Something very poetic about Bob being, ruined by the thing he's so passionate about, which is
like the
good
idea of
quality wine.
Trying to blast red wine out of a flugelhorn.
Yeah, I think Bob is probably unforgivably annoying. So therefore, Saz, you're forgiven.
Okay, Mother Superior. Have you ever
Yeah,
blown red wine out of a flugelhorn? I changed what I was going to say there for a moment. But...
I've never blown red wine out of a flugelhorn.
Do you think you could? If
Something
you were
I've always
asked
wanted to do.
I think we should try that. We should recreate
Yes.
it. We should recreate the confession every night. That would be what
Well,
we could
actually,
do.
Pinot Noir is my favourite red wine of all time.
You're not going to pour it down a...
Well, exactly. I would no more have poured a bottle of Pinot Noir into a flugelhorn than flown through the air.
It's probably never happened ever in history. Do you think
No.
that's never, ever been done?
But having said that, Simon Mayo, I think a flugelhorn, it was a very rare one, is probably worth thousands and thousands of pounds. I don't know, but I think it's a very
It's
expensive
a Schalke
instrument.
1920 B-flat flugelhorn.
Yeah, I think it was probably a lot of money. So in spite of the fact, Saz, that I think you had a case to actually get him on something, I'm not sure that this was the thing I would have done, because it wasted a great bottle of wine. It probably completely ruined him, his suit and everything, because red wine, you can't get it out. So I don't think I'm going to forgive you.
Sister Caroline.
I concur that the flugelhorn is the finest of wind instruments, and in that reason alone, she
you
should
play
be
one?
forgiven. Do I play a flugelhorn?
might do.
Only at the weekends. When not playing a flugelhorn or indulging in Pinot Noir, I do think that she should be forgiven purely for the fact that it's like something out of a Roald Dahl story and well worth watching.
Simon, enjoying the programme. Liquid flugelhorn, one of the funniest sounds I've ever heard. More, please. Anna in Devon.
And now you see, I didn't forgive yesterday, did I, on the confession? But I should have forgiven in retrospect, and I don't know if I can give a retrospective
can't.
forgiveness thing.
No.
But I didn't have the facts. I didn't know that it wouldn't corrode the flugelhorn, and I didn't know that a flugelhorn wasn't very expensive. Okay, thanks.
The only thing you need to know about a flugelhorn is that it sounds very funny when it's had water poured down it and John was trying to play Danny Boy. That's the only thing that you need. Here's tonight's. I don't think there's any... I'm not sure if there are any interesting... Oh, there are some interesting noises actually coming with this one. Ken has sent this one in. Ken, thank you. Father Simon and the charitable choir, perhaps it's the passing of another year that has urged me at last to unburden myself of this terrible tale of biblical proportions. Slightly overstating it. It was during the late 70s, around 77 or 78, I think the memory fades with the passing of time, that the atrocious action took place. I lived with our mother on a council estate, enjoyed many happy days playing outside in the street, for those were simpler times. In those days, everyone knew the neighbours. The man across the street was an Italian who used to own the ice cream van, of course. Next door was a nurse who worked in the local hospital. At the top of the road was the house owned by our local mechanic. Now, this man was a kind-hearted and generous soul who often helped out neighbours in times of mechanical need and frequently repaired cars to keep them on the road. His name was Frankie, and he was not your average mechanic, for he worked at the Rolls-Royce dealership. Oh, yes, he was a trained Rolls-Royce mechanic. Frankie's pride and joy was, of course, his own car, a car he had created. Being a skilled mechanic and having connections, he had turned his humble Hillman Hunter into his own dream car. It had the body of your everyday four-door saloon Hillman Hunter, but it had the front end transformed into, as you might have guessed, a Rolls-Royce, which sounds monstrous. It had the complete radiator grille assembly, and the bonnet had been customised and modified to accommodate the gable-like end, with a ridge down the middle and sloping top that blended neatly with the front wing tops. The car was resplendent in a deep shade of burgundy paintwork and lovingly polished whenever possible to a deep lustrous shine. So half Hillman Hunter, half Rolls-Royce. Living in the corner house, he had no garage or drive of his own, and so the car was parked up in the evening outside his house, next to the curb, where he could see it from the lounge, keeping an eye out for stray footballs and louts of all varieties. One evening I was playing outside with my best friend Dennis. It was a fine, warm... I know you're ahead of me. It was a fine, warm night approaching the end of the school year, so there was plenty of time to play outside before it got dark. At school that day we'd been learning about David and Goliath, and how the lowly David had slain the terrible giant with just the use of a simple slingshot. This must have fueled our curiosity, probably recognising the potential for hijinks and tomfoolery, sending projectiles flying in all directions at the top field after school, rather than any moral or religious tale related by our music teacher. It may have been the warm evening sun or just the sheer excitement of it all that led to the series of events that followed. Dennis came round as usual, and after tea we went out into the street with the intention of going onto the field to try out a makeshift slingshot fashioned from an old length of cloth. Out we rushed, eager to test out the ballistic potential, picking up a handful of ball bearings from a bagatelle-style game that we had. Well, the moment overtook us somewhat, and Dennis decided to try out this new wonder right there in the street. Before I knew what was happening, there was a swish, a whoop, and a whip into the air, and the projectiles were released. They arced away from us at an impressive rate, soaring high into the air, and up along the street our mouths went dry as we realised the inevitable destination. It was Frankie's vintage and almost certainly uninsurable car. The ball bearings plummeted to earth with considerable force, not enough to slay a giant maybe, but definitely enough to slay any hope of further play that evening, as they crashed down onto the carefully crafted bonnet, landing with sickening series of metallic clangs, clanks, rattles, and finally tinkles. Plenty for us to work on tomorrow. Each stainless steel sphere dented the bodywork, two smashed the windscreen. Instead of being a unique piece of motoring history, it now looked like the car at the end of Bonnie and Clyde. Within seconds, Frankie was out of the house, spitting fire and displaying all the anger of Goliath himself as he looked down the road to see no one as we were hiding behind the large hedge in my front garden. Several days passed by. I kept telling myself I should own up, but I knew that I couldn't afford to pay for the damage. More to the point, I didn't want to face the wrath of Frankie for defacing and damaging his pride and joy. One day when driving past our house, he stopped when he saw me in the street, wound his window down, which just about worked, and asked in an angry and accusative voice if I had anything to do with his damaged car, to which I calmly denied any such knowledge, and said it was Dennis. Nice support there, Father Simon. So I consequently am on my knees and seeking forgiveness from Dennis, whose father had a monstrous bill to pay, for publicly outing him as a wrongdoer and biblical marksman of the story, and of course from Frankie for being involved in damaging his car and flatly denying any involvement. It turns out, by the way, he owned several of these Rolls-Royce cars, so it turned out for the best in the end. I fall at the collector's feature. Remember that Johnny Cash song, One Piece at a Time?
Absolutely.
In which they actually just assemble a car in exactly the same way. It sounds as the way Frankie had assembled a half Hillman Hunter, half Rolls-Royce, a monstrosity that should have been put down, and probably was, by a ball bearing or two. Sister Rebecca speaks.
I really don't get the logic that it turned out he had quite a few of these monstrosities, therefore it's fine to damage one of them. It doesn't make sense.
Mean that.
Anyway, that's what it sounded like. I think it was awful that he blamed Dennis. Unforgivable,
Yes,
really. How can you do that? I mean,
It was him.
he should have done the opposite. He should have fessed up and denied it was Dennis. That's what any brave man would have done. So I'm afraid I can't forgive you, Ken. Sorry.
What do you think, Mother Super? Oh, nice there.
Oh, sorry.
Nice mic technique.
But I just want the boys here to remind me what a ball bearing used to do. What was the point of a ball bearing? Just remind me. What was it?
Well, if you're using it, he was using it in a bagatelle, wasn't he? So
Yeah,
it would just be sort of a small metal ball.
He would have used them, like in pinball machines. So
Yes.
he had it for that. But they used in machinery for making things go round.
So they'd taken them out of the pinball machine and they were using them.
Well, he had like a bagatelle. You remember those old games, wooden games, where you shove the ball bearings and it
Gotcha.
zooms round and then
I've
it
got you.
comes to rest.
I'm not quite old enough to remember.
No,
but
that's
thank
right.
you for
Of
telling
course
me.
not.
Yeah, I just think this is the hideousness of a Rolls Royce on the back of a Hillman Minx, was it?
On the front of a Hillman Hunter.
A Hillman Hunter. I just think it was a horrific kind of feeling. You see, I was...
It's almost like a perversion.
It is. It's very perverse. I was going to forgive, actually, up until the point where he blamed the other child and didn't... Was it Sam we're talking about?
Dennis.
Dennis, sorry. But I was going to forgive until that. But the fact that you actually blamed somebody else and you got out of any payment that might have been involved or was involved means I'm not going to forgive you.
Brother Matthew.
Frankie's coming in for quite a lot of flack here, isn't he? For having the talent to be able to put together a car like that and then having lots of them.
It's his fault,
where's
isn't it?
he keeping all of these cars? If he hasn't got a garage and he lives in the corner house, where's he keeping all these cars that are half Hillmans, half Rolls Royces?
It's unnatural. That's what it is.
Yes. That said,
I think there were laws against that in those days.
having used a slingshot myself, it's amazing the amount of power you feel when you use a slingshot, and it's so tempting. It's one of those things that when you use it, you think, I shouldn't really be doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. How far is that going? How fast is that going? Isn't this great fun? And oh dear, something's been broken. And so they're a bit like puddles in that sense, in that you know that you shouldn't be leaping into them, but you do it anyway because you're young.
What did you hit with your slingshot?
Well, like windows and stuff like that. So,
What? You hit windows in the plural?
Yeah, a very small window that I obviously straight away said I shall pay for the
got
damage.
red. You've got red.
I will pay for any damage.
Whose windows did
It
you
was
break?
somebody who was quite happy to have that window broken and very happy when it was replaced in full by me.
Sewer rat.
Oh dear. So I'm going to forgive those in glass houses. Quite
Because you
literally
have to.
shouldn't throw ball bearings.
Here's tonight's confession. On drive time, it comes from Al. Thank you very much indeed. Dear Simon and the Disciples of Darkness. It's not how they're normally addressed. I seek your forgiveness for what can only seem like an outtake from the film The Hangover. To set the scene, I was working as an after-sales manager for an international company and was informed in January 1989 that I was to go and work in Paris for the next year, setting up a French version of our UK operation. This was, for a moderately uneducated northern lad, a great honour. So the work started. I would fly out of Newcastle early every Monday morning and return late Friday evening of the same week. Quite understandably, I was required to submit a weekly report, which confirmed the work was on schedule. After a couple of months, my boss informed me that he was coming to Paris to see how I was getting on, and after giving my efforts his nod of approval, he made an executive decision to take me out as a treat for all my hard work. We were going to have dinner at the Eiffel Tower. We duly arrived at the tower by taxi and were greeted by 4 piers or lifts, 1 to the restaurant, 2 for tourists and a spare. On this occasion, 1 pier was closed for a private function, 2 were closed for repairs, and that left only 1 that was open, where the entire population of Japan had been transported there and were waiting in line to buy tickets. As my boss looked at the mass of tourism in horror and envisaged a 4-hour wait, I seized the initiative, keen to impress. I vaulted the barriers, pushed my way past the line and elbowed my way to the ticket office, ignoring all protests. I shouted, "Deux billets pour le haut, s'il vous plaît," at the man in the ticket booth. Did you like that? That was quite good.
Superb. Yes, I'm loving this.
Awful, Simon Mayo.
Deux billets, 2
pour-
tickets pour le haut. I imagine you would say pour l'eau, s'il vous plaît, but I thought that might sound like water, but, for the top. Is that right? Pour l'eau.
What's the top?
It'll be.
Anyway, that's what he said. He says, "Deux billets pour le haut." H-A-U-T, s'il vous plaît.
Deuxième floor.
At the man at the ticket booth and received my 2 passes. I made my way back past the line of tourists, my chest greatly puffed out and 2 tickets in hand to a bemused boss. I ignored all the grumbling and moaning from the Japanese. We spent the next hour at the top of the Eiffel Tower gasping at the spectacular views and then decided to make our way down for dinner. After half an hour of circling the level which housed the restaurant, trying every set of steps, doors and lifts, we still didn't seem able to make our way into the main entrance. It was clearly open as we could see smartly dressed Parisians going in. I suggested to my boss that we climb the railings, but before I could retract the offer, he was already halfway over the fence. This was only moderately dangerous, but looking back seems excessive. You could say that. We approached the entrance nonchalantly and were greeted by two elegantly dressed young women in evening dresses who gave us what we presumed were menus. My boss asked where the drinks were, and we were directed down the stairs to a room full of people. We walked across to the bar and ordered 2 drinks. When we asked how much it would cost, we were told everything was free. We both looked at each other with that boyish look of, did he really say that? We exchanged our deux bières for deux champagne. Did you understand that? I think so. On closer inspection, we appeared to be in a large ballroom with chefs serving people from a huge buffet-style serving area that stretched along the entire length of the ballroom. We looked at our menu and discovered it was in fact an invitation for the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the opening of the Eiffel Tower. We had gate-crashed the largest posh party in France since Louis XIV. In fact, as we looked around the ballroom, we noticed it was full of the rich and the famous. There was enough gold hanging off the attendees to sink a ship. It might just be me, but I'm sure we spotted Juliette Binoche. Anyway, for the next 4 hours, we kept a low profile, eating and drinking the best that French cuisine could offer. It was mighty fine. Until the official photographers started to do the rounds. My boss and I just happened to be stood next to the first group of celebs that were asked to pose, so we joined the group. Champagne in one hand, smoked salmon in the other. We were smiling and looking as if we were part of this scene. I can't recall whose idea it was, but one of us suggested we should follow the photographers and join in as many of the photo opportunities as we could. It's fair to say that in the coming weeks, there will be quite a few people, and seeing the photographs would be asking, qu'est-ce que c'est? I tried a few smiles at a glamorous madame in a ball gown who I was told was the movie star Isabel Pascoe. I thought momentarily of starting a rapport with her, but my boss said I might just draw attention to our undoubted gatecrasher status. We entertained ourselves until 4 a.m., after which we made our way back to the hotel, waving pathetically at Isabel as we left. I missed work the next day. My boss missed his flight, but we did have a night to remember. So I'm seeking forgiveness from the team for queue-jumping the thousands of Japanese tourists, gate-crashing the centenary celebration of the Eiffel Tower, for gorging on the free salmon and champagne for hours, and for being the Tommy tourist on almost every photograph which found its way into the glossy magazines and French tabloids. Paris Match will never forgive me. I still have the commemorative invitation which makes me smile every time I see it, and a slightly crumpled photo from a newspaper of Sacha Distel and Johnny Hallyday flanked by 2 complete strangers. Al, thank you very much indeed. Well, it sounds all's fair in love and war, really. The Entente Cordiale, vive la France. What do you say, Sister
Well, I mean,
Rebecca?
who wouldn't gatecrash a party like that if they had the opportunity?
Well, if you
really?
climb over railings on the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, that's very true. That was a bit silly, but they didn't realise it at the time. I think, I think anyone would have done that. It was great. I admire their chutzpah in getting into those photos.
What's the French for chutzpah?
Chutzpah. I think it's probably chutzpah.
Yeah.
I don't think the Japanese tourists would have been that bothered by it. And, you know, the people who gave the party obviously had so much money, it didn't make any difference whether a few glasses of champagne were lost to these two. And I think it's great. It reminds me of that guy. Who was it who had his photo taken with all those celebrities everywhere? Famous
it was
man.
him, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, he was, so famous I can't remember his name. Anyway, so you're completely forgiven, Al.
Mother Superior, what say you?
Well, I can identify with this particular confession on 2 levels.
Yes.
First of all, I've been to the Eiffel Tower and I thought I won't pay for the lift, I'll walk up. And then I got stuck on the 5th floor and got vertigo and had to be escorted down. Because there is a kind of staircase that you can go up and walk. But because I didn't realise that because it's all crisscrossy and metal, as you look down, you can see, you think you're going to die. So anyway, that's my first...
No, you don't.
Yes.
Just...
My second thing is that I was once at a posh do in a posh place in London. On my floor, it was a poor do. On the floor below, it was a very rich do. But we all left via the same entrance. The rich do people got fantastic goodie bags, and they said to me, which do have you been at? I said I was at that one, so I got a fantastic goodie bag. I'm all for this.
Did it have a gold ingot in it? Or something?
It had something along those lines. It had lovely perfume. I remember spraying myself on the tube on the way home. So I actually think that this is great on all levels, and you're totally forgiven.
Did you pose with famous people?
No, I wasn't at the actual do. I just got the goodie bag on the way out.
What do you say, Brother Matthew?
It's the photos that make this, really, isn't it? It's not just gate-crashing a great party with Juliette Binoche in it, no less. Definitely going for any parties with Juliette is in attendance. So, yes, it's the photos. Well done for not only gate-crashing a party and hurling yourselves over the barriers, where, quite frankly, there was no security at all, as it turns out, and getting yourself on the photos. Well done, get yourself in Paris Match.
Paris Match with Sacha
Très bien,
Distel
as I
and Johnny
believe they
Hallyday.
say over the
Indeed.
channel. Yes.
Great.
Formidable.
Paul in Stockholm writes, Janssens Frestelse is the most wonderful Swedish dish you could possibly wish for. Don't think about the ingredients, it's great. Super late night nosh with a cold beer, often eaten as a midnight feast, traditionally on Christmas Eve. How about that? Are you slightly more tempted now, Matt?
Well, by the beer, definitely, yeah.
Oh, for goodness sake.
The head girl has spoken.
Oh, for goodness sake!
Wow.
Well, really, go stand in the corner and put this dunce's hat on.
Listen, I've said Nigel will be able to make... Nigel can make anything taste
Yes, he
good,
will,
so we're going to do that. Thank you very much indeed. So Tess sends in tonight's tale. Tess, thank you very much indeed. Simon and the Caring Collective. I seek your forgiveness for a sinful act I committed some 12 years ago. In the year 2000, my husband James went mad for competitions. In truth, he had a good success rate too. DVDs, books and other silly stuff were always being sent to our house on a regular basis, all stuff he'd won. Of course, the more success he got, the more competitions James entered. Prior to the event in question, which I'm about to tell you about, I remember him winning 2 tickets for Bradford City versus Manchester United. Now, I'm not a big football fan, but I am a fan of David Beckham. Pardon?
How exciting! What was the first prize? Sorry.
It's a David Beckham thing. See, she likes David Beckham.
Right, okay.
Anyway, made several comments about it. Anyway, I'm not a big football fan, but I've lost my place now. I'm not a big football fan, but I am a fan of David Beckham and made several comments about this, as did his brother Dave. So imagine our shock when instead of going with us, he went with Dino, a friend of his, who I'd never met. It was, by all accounts, a corker of a match and a great view of David Beckham's legs. Anyway, towards the end of the year, the winning streak had died a little when we still got the odd cutout from the papers appearing on our notice board as he attempted to get back on the competition track. And as money around that time was a bit stretched, we had to cut our cloth to suit. Myself on the latest fashion and James on his fortnightly football fix. And other days out with the lads to his major love, which was rugby league. So you're going to really like this. I arrived home on one Thursday to find that the Royal Mail had left one of those cards requesting collection from our local office. I put it in the usual spot and thought no more of it. James was at footy training that night, and then on the Friday he stayed back with the lads to go to the pub. I was not happy. As we had little money, we decided that James's annual pilgrimage to the Rugby League Grand Final was not going to happen this year. However, on this particular Saturday in question, he told me that he'd made plans to watch the game in the local pub. Now, having not seen him on the last 2 nights, I introduced some conditions to this, namely that he had to come and do some shopping first and he had to do a few errands that morning. OK, he said, rather grumpily. I guess I can pick up whatever it is at the post office while we're out. Well, a rather strained morning followed. Everywhere was packed, the weather was lousy, and tensions were running high. I finally cracked when he mentioned for about the 9th time that he needed to go to the post office. Now, Father Simon, at this point I let fly with a barrage of words. I may have said something like, I've taken out some of the non-drive time words. I haven't seen you for days, and you're going out for an afternoon aperitif with your friends to watch the rugby. Will you stop going on about the wretched Royal Mail building and spend a small amount of quality time with me, please? How did I do? Okay.
Could have been me, that.
He was as good as gold for the next couple of hours, and after traipsing around several high street clothes shops, he went to watch the big game on television. Feeling rather bad about shouting at him at the weekend, I offered to go to the Royal Mail building in my lunch break that Monday. His brother Dave worked fairly nearby, so at midday he drove me to collect the mystery item that had been left at the post office. Oh, no. I expected some junk mail from a company who hadn't bothered to pay the postage. You know how it goes. But what was brought to the counter was a rather ragged letter. Back in the car, I opened the envelope to find 4 tickets to the Rugby League Grand Final between St Helens and Wigan, which had already been played 36 hours earlier. Not only did the prize contain the tickets, it included additional VIP entry into one of the bars, free drinks, and a 3-course meal as well. Dave looked at me. I looked at Dave. We were both a little bit stunned. I found myself wondering how I was going to explain this to James. Well, they say blood is thicker than water, Father Simon, but at this point, Dave disproved the theory by saying, look, say nothing. And he reminded me of the Manchester United David Beckham debacle that we'd both missed out on. He would probably have just taken that Dino bloke and a couple of football team lads anyway, said Dave. So I took his advice and said nothing. Later in the week, though, unable to live with the guilt any longer, I called the marketing company that sent the tickets and explained the situation. I asked if they could do anything without going into the whole event, and a couple of days later, a case of beer and a Great Britain rugby shirt turned up with a letter saying he'd won the runners-up prize. He was completely made up, and he wore his shirt with pride for several weeks, never knowing that he'd actually won the top prize. To this day, both myself and Dave have kept this secret to ourselves. But I cannot live with the burden any longer. And so, Father Simon, I ask for forgiveness from my darling husband, who could have enjoyed a fabulous afternoon of sport and luxury, but who was denied this pleasure because I pulled a strop. I hope the collective can sympathise with me. From Tess, who hadn't told her husband until that moment that it was the crate of beer. That was nothing. It was actually 4 tickets to the Rugby League Grand Final, drinks, meal, everything. What do you say, Sister?
Wow,
Rebecca?
this is going to come as a massive shock for James if he's listening or if he finds out. It's pretty obvious who this involves. I mean, by the sounds of it, even if he had got the tickets before the match, she wouldn't have been very happy about him going because she didn't want him to go to the pub. She hadn't seen him for a couple of nights anyway. But it was actually Dave, wasn't it, who suggested that she doesn't say anything.
Dave,
so I think maybe I'm going to blame Dave because it's the most easy option. I don't really know what to say. Also, I'm surprised she's confessing now because what he didn't know can't have harmed him, and now he might be thinking, ooh, I'm not so happy about that.
No, he
so
thought
yeah,
it was
I'm going to
great.
blame Dave and forgive you, Tess.
What do you say, Mother Superior?
Oh, excuse me. I would have done the same thing, I think. I would have just kept quiet. I mean, it depends on how important you think the tickets are. And obviously for him, they were very important. And I'm trying to put myself in the place where somebody would have done that to me and withheld tickets for like a major band I wanted to see.
Yes.
Or something. I would be really
With a luxury meal and
exactly,
free bar.
and maybe a backstage pass. That would have really hacked me off. But I don't think any harm was done. He did get something as a result of it all, and he, ignorance is bliss, isn't it? Sometimes.
Well, it was until about 30 seconds ago, and now he knows precisely.
I'm sure he won't mind. I'm sure just buy some more tickets and make it up to him.
Of course.
You're forgiven,
Brother Matthew.
This story is the flip side to yesterday's story, isn't it? Where basically yesterday you get into a major event for nothing, you managed to blag your way in. This way, you had invites to something huge that you really wanted to go to, and you didn't get in because you didn't know about it. I think this is, to be honest, he got beer out of it and he got a shirt out of it. So, frankly, do you know what? He's very happy.
But he could have had 4 tickets.
I know he could have got tickets, and he could have had to decide whether he was going to take his wife and his brother along to this grand final.
Because you don't like rugby.
Rugby league, absolutely. Grand final rugby league, definitely.
Someone's rattled Rebecca's cage tonight, haven't they? I'm not sure what's going on. She's rather feisty, I think.
I think she's feisty because she's been on television.
Oh, it's the television mentality. That's what it is.
That's it for this week. Another piece of audio gold or occasionally silver. Thank you very much indeed for listening. Let us know your confession if you have one. Confessions@bbc.co.uk. More live every day next week.